Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the workshop meeting of your Board of Trustees, and thank you for coming out on this lovely spring evening to honor our heroes, and especially to honor the men and women in uniform who serve and protect our community. Please rise and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk Fitzgerald, may we have the roll call, please?
Certainly, President Gallagher. Trustee Hansen?
Here.
Trustee Timmick?
Here.
Trustee Allen?
Here.
Trustee Rudolph?
Here.
Trustee Sifferman?
Here.
Trustee Terrell?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Having read the agenda, does any trustee have any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda?
Yes, President Gallagher, if I may, I would like to pull items D and E off of the public properties and recreation report. Information on both of those items will be coming at a later date, so I think we'll pull them tonight.
Thank you, Trustee Hansen. Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll move on to our citizens' comments. That's erroneously at the bottom after our committee reports. We'll pull it up to the top so our fair citizens, they're welcome to stay if they would like, but are not required to stay before they address the board. Is there anyone this evening who would like to address the board? Please. So please use the microphone. You just have to push the button up and state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Kristen Wiggins. I was actually born in Western Springs, but I just recently moved back. We've been back in Western Springs about 3 years. And in the intervening years, I've had the privilege of living in lots of great communities. But one of the things that's really amazed me since I moved back to Western Springs is what a great job neighbors and friends do of taking care of one another, which is why I'm here to talk today about why Western Springs should opt back into Cook County's minimum wage and paid sick leave ordinance. I feel like we're a community that is really characterized by the extreme care we take for one another, and I feel like this is really how we could best express that. I wanted to share two quick little stories with you that have happened since I've moved back that really, I think, highlight how we go the extra mile. My daughter takes the bus to school, and her bus driver lost his daughter. His daughter died. And one of the ladies in our neighborhood organized for every Friday a different family in the neighborhood to bring cookies and a note to the bus stop to say, we appreciate you and we're thinking of you. Just last week, I was like on a mom's group on Facebook, and someone said, has anybody seen the FedEx guy, Manny? I'm worried about him. And I thought, well, that's like really thoughtful. And 3 other people texted back saying, I heard he's sick. And someone else said, I called FedEx to make sure he's okay. He'll be back in a month. And this is not a normal community thing to do. This is an amazing community thing to do. This is like what Western Springs is. It's a community that goes the extra mile for the people who live and work here and take care of one another. And like I said, I think that this is the basis for why we should decide to opt back into the minimum wage and paid sick leave. Someone making $8.25 will earn only $16,500 annually. And of course, it goes without saying that that's if you don't get sick, or a kid doesn't get sick, or something else doesn't happen. That's $16,500 in a year. Now, we all know that's not quite nearly enough to live in Western Springs, but it even isn't enough to live in our broader community. I looked up on Trulia today, and the average rent in this zip code and the neighboring zip codes is $2,500 a month. And working with another not-for-profit that I've worked with, we were looking for an apartment for a lower income family, and we're trying to get them anywhere in the LT catchment district. And I tell you, you would be hard pressed to find even a 1-bedroom apartment for $1,500. Now, assuming that a person making $16,500 a year didn't eat anything and didn't consume anything else, they couldn't even get within our community boundaries of LT. And I feel like that's not reflective of the kind of community we are. And I think that there's something that points to the fact that the people who live here would agree with me. In 2014, in a non-binding resolution, the majority of Western Springs residents voted in favor of raising the minimum wage in Cook County. We did the same thing again in 2016 when the question of non-binding referendum on paid sick leave came out. People in Western Springs actually are saying, we are these people. This is who we want to be. We don't want to be like we don't want to be Hinsdale's little sister or some other version of expansion of LaGrange. We want to be the people in the community who take care of one another, and this is how we can express that. We don't get a lot of options to do these kinds of things locally very often, where we can really express what our values are, and we can really put our money where our mouth is. I've been working with lots of folks who've done tons of research on this, and I think that when they come up and talk to you, you'll hear a lot of really great statistics that would allay any of the fears that you have. But the bottom line is this: it's not going to cost that much to the businesses and the residents of Western Springs to do this, but it will make a huge impact on the members of our community who work here at low-wage jobs. Thank you for your time, and I really urge you to continue to pass this, to opt into the Cook County minimum wage and paid sick leave ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mrs. Quinlan, welcome.
Hello, good afternoon or good evening. I'm Mary
I think the
Ann
mic is turned off again.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's okay. I'm Mary Ann Quinlan, resident of Western Springs. I have some data-related information I wanted to share. I want to thank you all for allowing us to educate you over the last many months, to educate ourselves. We have learned a lot. We would continue to learn. If this were to drift on and on, we would probably learn something new, every time we take a look at it. I'm and the things I'll be covering are WSBA and the WSBA survey that they conducted. Some discussion about the business types of businesses in Western Springs, or specifically in WSBA, and how the impact on each of these types of businesses varies, and perhaps where it would be productive to be considering its impact, and where it's there is no impact, other types of businesses in which there is no impact. I want to briefly comment about the Seattle situation. That's often a reference point that people use when they say, oh, well, this happened in Seattle, and there's reports one way or the other. I just want to just familiarize you just a little bit with some things I've learned about their particular situation, which is not debatable. I want to briefly talk about the letters that you've received. My FOIA request came in this morning. It was so exciting. I had a chance to start taking a look. I'm not all the way through, but I was so encouraged by the not just the volume of supportive letters from the people in the community, but the wealth of experience that people were sharing. Many people were sharing their professional experiences. This is not particularly like me, but I was sitting in a lunchroom at Hinsdale South where I was subbing today, and I got up and I walked over to the only other person in the room that I knew, and I threw my arms around her and just was so happy for the support that the community members have shown. And when you're, as you all know, probably a lot of what you do isn't even noticed. So I did, I felt like, oh my God, maybe this is worth it. People are actually noticing and trying to get their voices heard. I'll comment briefly on the voting results, and that's pretty much it. WSBA sent out a survey. The Western Springs Business Association sent out a survey to its members. They have 100 members, and they received 33 responses. So the first item, of course, is the response rate. Now you can, they have presented that that's an admirable response rate. We've had information sort of to the contrary, that particularly since the composition of those businesses was not disclosed, it's for privacy reasons, I'm sure it's not transparent. It's very opaque results. So, but given that, the response rate ought to be more than double that for us to really put a lot of confidence in it. That being said, we're willing to take that information and discuss it. So 62% of the businesses who responded said that they would be adversely impacted. So that's 62% of 33 businesses. So we're down to about 20 or 21 businesses. And then there was other information given about the number of employees that those businesses employ. It was like over 700. So we're looking at that number and trying to figure out, 700? What is that? Like, who are these businesses? So we started digging into, we don't know who responded to the survey, but we do know who the members of WSBA are. So we went through and we started looking at them. So I was quite surprised that 20 out of the 100 businesses in WSBA are not Western Springs businesses. They don't appear to be located here. Some of them can't at all be located here. Like, for instance, one of them is Max Aquatics. I mean, there's a swimming pool in McCook. That's not here. There's a number of other businesses which I have listed. So, if you want the details, I can list some of the ones I was kind of surprised were members. It's fine that they're members of a business association. That's great. But they aren't in our town. So just for playing with numbers, take the 20 businesses that we have, let's say there's a bad impact. Let's just say only 80% of those are in town. We don't know who responded. So we're down to about 16 businesses. So one of there's two types of exclusions that we've all learned about. All this information was readily available to WSBA to make available to their members a long time ago. And as we, civilians or whatever, have gotten involved in it, we've, come to read a lot of legalese. So just to remind everybody, these are businesses that are excluded from being covered by the minimum wage ordinance. I'll just talk about that one. Any business with less than 4 workers. Any public business and any religious-based business. And that does cover, well, in terms of the public and religious-based, there's, I think, 6 that might fall under that category in the WSBA list. We have no idea about the number of businesses that have less than 4 workers, which would not be eligible for or would not be covered under the minimum wage ordinance. But when the Village of Wilmette was looking at that, because they actually are looking at the same issue again right now, they have been for a little bit of time, in a rather exhaustive process. I listened to 2 hours of audio, and there's probably another 8 hours of audio on their website, and all the documentation, and they've got consultants in, et cetera, et cetera. When they looked at it, and it started to determine how many businesses in their town were less than 4 workers, it was a considerable number. It wasn't half, but it was nearly half. So we don't have that information. That's a reasonable type of question to ask in a short survey, and that was not asked. So we don't know how many of those businesses in WSBA would even be covered under this ordinance just because of the number of workers. Also in Wilmette, in their admirable and exhaustive study that is still ongoing, when that village chose to take another look at these ordinances, they wanted to survey their businesses. So they did. They surveyed every business who had received a business license from the village. I guess, I don't know if we issued them or not, but that was one of the criteria. And also any business that has a water bill from the village. So whoever's in their Wilmette Business Association or whatever they have, that's not the population that they surveyed. They surveyed every business in town that they could reasonably find. That was not done here. As I said, we surveyed the 100 businesses that are in WSBA, only 80 of which are in our town. Okay, so that's from the business standpoint. And then to reiterate one last time, in case this hasn't come through loud and clear, there's a number of workers who are not covered by the minimum wage ordinance. Any union worker is not covered. So we know that covers Mariano's. We know that covers some people at Casey's. There may be others. So those are excluded. Any worker under 18 years old is excluded. Again, that was information readily available to the Business Association a year ago. Tipped workers are barely covered by this bill. This bill does, or this ordinance does not change the minimum wage for tipped workers. It does not increase it. The current, they have to be paid, the current rate is they have to be paid $4.95 an hour, and employers have to make up, if the employees don't make tips enough to cover the $8.25 state minimum wage, then employers have to apply a tip credit or something to build them back up to that. There is a, they are covered, tip workers are covered to the extent that there is a cost of living increase beginning in beginning this year, beginning this July, where they will be eligible for a cost of living. But that is based on these state minimum wage, $4.95, $8.25 kind of numbers. It has nothing to do with the currently 10 going to 11, ultimately $13 minimum wage. And something that I hadn't really known how to process before was that disabled workers are also specifically excluded. When we had there was a general government committee meeting, and representatives from Casey's were there, and they laudably hire and employ a number of workers who are have some disabilities. Those workers are also not covered by the minimum wage ordinance in Cook County. So, under 18 disabled, tipped workers, and union workers not covered. If you got less than 4 employees, 4 workers, excluding the owner, not covered. If you're a public entity like a library or a school, you're not covered. And if you're religiously based, you're not covered. There's one other category that's not specifically an exclusion, but it has to do with this whole issue of the level playing field. The Cook County ordinance is written to look at workers, where the workers work. Rather, the people covered under it are people who work in an opt-in area, in a place that has not opted out. So any worker who would work in Western Springs, if we were to opt in, would be covered, regardless of where the business was located. Now, the concern that makes complete sense to me about the level playing field, if it makes the way where it makes sense is when you talk about a restaurant, or you talk about a retail store, or you talk about what dentist you're going to go to. When you have a choice of buying your cookies here or buying them someplace else. The level playing field is a reasonable thing to think about. When the business has to be transacted here because it's done in your home, then there is no issue of level playing field. If you operate a business, the 2 categories of businesses that are represented in WSBA, we have 3 home care businesses, and we have 5 what I would call home building or home improvement businesses. Those, by definition, those services would be provided in Western Springs. So regardless of where the business was located, the business could be located in Mississippi, it could be located in Hinsdale, it could be located in Western Springs, wouldn't matter. Those employees would be covered by the minimum wage ordinance if we opted in. So if somebody wants the privilege of taking care of people in our community, or building their homes or whatever, they're all competing equally. There is no level playing field issue whatsoever for those types of businesses. So it's not an exclusion, but it's something to consider when you think about this level playing field argument. I don't know what the revenue impact is to the village for different types of businesses. When I was listening to my first 2 hours of audio tape in Wilmette, there was a whole lot of discussion about restaurants, even to the exclusion of retail. And it was sort of the conclusion there that restaurants are not only how you make your town lively, and it's what residents want, but it's also where you can reasonably expect to get some sales tax revenue. And that it's really, really hard in retail to fill the empty storefronts these days. That's not the fault of minimum wage. There's a lot of factors in place. So, So there are certain categories of businesses that are real vulnerable these days, and have different impacts on our town. A restaurant and retail and just businesses would bring sales tax revenue, and certainly restaurants create liveliness, and the small town culture of having a little store, I extol the wonders of the people who help me at True Value all the time. I mean, there's real value in having those businesses, but absolutely. And so as a village and as a community, if those businesses need need more support, that needs to get looked at. But that is outside of the issue of minimum wage and paid sick. There's parking, there's business promotion, there may be a number of things that have nothing to do with this. And we're not going to save retail businesses from whatever may be coming to them by having lower skilled, less trained workers. That runs contrary to any sense. So that's the conclusion of my remarks about WSBA, and pretty much about business type as well. We have, of the 100 businesses listed in WSBA, 19 of them are business and financial services businesses. 15 are healthcare, like dentists and orthodontists and things like that. We have 8 businesses that provide classes and tutoring, like School of Rock Hinsdale, which I don't think is located here, but they're part of our business group. There's 8 realtors, and there are 8 retail stores included, and I included the French Market as part of that. Those 8 retail stores, Casey's and True Value and Kirschbaum's and the French Market, and there must have been a couple more. They're an entity unto itself that deserves some consideration outside of this discussion of minimum wage. We have 5 home building businesses, 3 businesses that provide home care services, 3 nonprofits, 2 of which are located out of our town, Legacy Guild and Community Nurse Association. I mentioned Max Aquatics. Okay, that's pretty much it in terms of the business types. Businesses that are located out of our town that would be eligible to contribute to this survey include Bannerville, which is no longer located here, a pest management business that is not here, Max Aquatics, I mentioned the nonprofits, School of Rock I mentioned, Impact Dance Studio. They list their locations as Countryside and LaGrange. And the Spirito Singers list a location of Oak Brook. Okay, moving on to the Seattle law. What's real important to know about the Seattle law is that, first of all, it's a $15 law, $15 minimum wage. It's not a $13 minimum wage. Okay, that's pretty easy to understand. The part I did not understand until recently is that in the state of Washington, the state of California, and only 5 other states, tipped workers get the minimum wage plus whatever tips they get. So when you hear horrible things are happening, at least on one side of the argument in Seattle, keep in mind that their law is completely different from ours when it concerns restaurants. Tipped workers in our situation will continue to get the state minimum of $4.95, scaling it up to $8.25, and now with a cost of living adjustment, what's that going to be, a couple of percent. The reason that we have a law that excludes young workers and tipped workers and disabled workers and who did I miss? Places less than 4 workers and et cetera, is that these ordinances were based on compromise and negotiation that happened in the city of Chicago a full year before the Cook County created their ordinance. So they didn't just, it wasn't just a bunch of do-gooders trying to figure out how to make things better. There was a lot of thought and a lot of discussion on both sides. That's how we ended up with the law. That is not the best law in the world, but it's the only one that we have an opportunity to provide to workers in our town. I mentioned the letters, the three that, I'm not mentioning names, but there was I just want to, the reason I even made this FOIA request was when I heard the verbiage from a restaurant executive, shall I say, who is involved with the restaurant system in Chicago, who understands very clearly the impact on that type of business for having their wages escalate and for having to think about paid sick. And that person, I know you've all received and heard that person's response. That was so encouraging. First of all, that we'd have somebody in our community in that position who would put his neck out and say that the paid sick leave and minimum wage increases made a positive effect on their businesses. There was also a human resources executive and an attorney who responded, partly in their professional capacity. So these aren't just a bunch of do-gooders. It's not just, the morality is where we start, but it is not the only thing we want to leave you with. Finally, just to state for the record, the voting results were strong. Here I am looking for them. I don't have them here. So there was a 60 and a 67% approval of the two ordinances, or the two referenda. The minimum wage came in at about 60% approval in Western Springs, and the other one I think was about 67%. The turnout was good in the first one, and it was excellent in the second one. Over 80% of the people, so much so that even considering the people that didn't vote, we had more than half the people who voted in this town voted for the paid sick leave. And I understand that the wording is different. That is to be expected and normal in a non-binding referendum. And that concludes my comments. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? I would like to remind everyone of our public comment guidelines. I want everyone to have an equal opportunity to be heard, but we have a very extensive agenda as well, and our guidelines are at the front door. Typically, we're limited to three to 5 minutes per person, so if you could please stay within that so that we can move on and conduct our business as well, I'd appreciate that. Please go ahead, come on up. I think it's on.
Hi, I'm Jane Falvey, and I'm a resident in the village here, and I'm going to take
Hi, Jane.
very brief time to talk about the earned sick time ordinance and why it's important that you all be brave and vote for it. And it's actually not even a brave decision, it's a very logical decision to make. The ordinance basically says that full-time workers can earn up to 5 sick days per year. So why should you vote for it? Well, your constituents, the village, we all voted for it in November of 2016 when it was called the Cook County Earned Sick Time Referendum. It was an advisory question, and the referendum won with 67.5% of the votes cast. So if you listen to your constituents, that would be a no-brainer right there. Number 2, it's good for Western Springs business. Why is it good for Western Springs businesses? Well, it's proven that paid sick days reduce employee turnover, which saves money in advertising for employees. It saves money in interviewing and training new hires. Workers are going to choose working in Western Springs over perhaps a neighboring town if they know they're going to get earned sick leave, if they have the opportunity to get that benefit. So workers, your employees, they'll have greater loyalty to our businesses here in town. They're going to have greater productivity, and our village will have the chance to pick, higher quality workers, which will just be great for all of us. Now, how much is it? Well, at the most, it's going to cost $440 per person annually, and that is based on someone working full-time, 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, and that's for one person. Sounds like a lot, but you know what? Because of the new federal tax cuts that were just enacted, which provided a huge windfall to all companies and businesses, that is basically negated. So, and if you remember that this tax cut was made in perpetuity by our government. Okay, so unlike the personal tax that we benefited from, ours goes away. This, as of now, is in perpetuity. So if you talk to some of our more, I'm a teacher, I'm not business savvy, but our business savvy people know more about what a huge amount of money they have gained from this tax cut. And finally, it's easy to keep track of all of the sick time and the hours with all the business tools that are available. So why should you do it? Western Springs voters voted for it. It's good for businesses, and there's a need for it. I got some gross facts for you. Here's my first gross fact. According to the CDC, among food workers who worked at least one shift in the last year while suffering from diarrhea and vomiting, 49% reported to work because they wouldn't be paid if they stayed home. They needed the money. University of Pittsburgh researchers estimate that the lack of paid sick days resulted in 5 million additional cases of flu during the 2009 H1N1 epidemic. Talking to you now as a mom and a wife, as with family members who are immunocompromised. Think of our friends. How many people do we know who have suffered from breast cancer and have been on chemotherapy? This is, you think of 5 million more people who are suffering from H1N1 because they didn't get earned sick leave, no sick days. So it's dangerous for everybody to get sick. It's dangerous for some more people in our community to get sick than others. So let's be the village that takes care of our community. Let's take care of the people ourselves. Now, I'm putting my teacher hat on because I'm a teacher. I've been lucky to live and work in multiple states and in multiple districts, and I have seen in my observation that life is hard for families without sick leave. Sick kids stay in school. They go to the nurse, and the nurse will send them back to the classroom because there's no place for them to go. I have sent kids to, and they'll tell me, you know, my mom can't pick me up. She's working. She can't take the day off. And mom is working, or dad is working, or whoever the guardian is working because they have to, because they need to bring the money home. It's not because they don't love their child. It's because they need the money. If they had earned sick leave, maybe they could take a day off to take care of their kid. In the meantime, what's happening to those kids? Those kids are being sent back to the classroom to be taken care of by a teacher. And, you know, teachers do the best they can. We might put them in the reading corner. We might put them in a bean bag. Maybe they'll choose to sit at their desk. These are kids who are sick. These are kids who have the flu, who have temperature of 101 or 102. Maybe they have an absolutely miserable cold and they're sick as a dog. And your heart just breaks for them because they'd rather be in their bed at home. You know their parents would rather have them be home with them, but they can't because they can't afford to. And you know, what if you're, on the other hand, what if you're one of those folks who maybe has a kid who's immunocompromised? Well, what's going to happen to your kid now? Is your kid going to get sick now, maybe because there's more sick kids in the classroom? So, there's lots of implications, lots of good that the Earned Sick Leave Act can do. So, for a small cost, if not no cost at all, the Earned Sick Leave can have a measurable effect on the lives of the people who work within our village, whether they're a home health care worker or a restaurant worker, whoever they are. It could have a measurable effect on those of us who live in the village. So let's be the village that takes care of our community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jane. Anyone else? Again, I'd like to remind you of the time limitation, and also if you have a new and different perspective.
Thank you. I will edit my comments to try to fit things in. I appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
My name is Stephen Baker. My name is it's still Stephen Baker. I live at 4548 Woodland Avenue. It is my joy to be the spouse of Trustee Rudolph, and my honor to just make a couple reflections here. For more than 25 years, I've been an evaluator at the University of Chicago. I do evaluations of programs for children and families, and we are constantly approached by organizations, whether it's the state, whether it's private foundations like the McCormick Foundation, whether it's the federal government, hoping for certainty in decisions. They really want to know whether they're making the right decision, and they hope by coming to someone that does research that we can do the kind of work that tells them this is definitely the right thing to do. Today I kind of want to do a Nixon to China thing here, because I want to argue that as I look at the research, and you've all looked at it a lot as well, it's certainly possible to find studies that support any position you would want to take. If you're inclined to believe that this is not a good idea, you can find elements of things that suggest it's not a good idea. And if you think it is a good idea, you can cite lots of things that indicate the benefits of having both sick leave and higher minimum wage laws. Things like less turnover, a lot of things you've already heard, less illness at work, greater equality as a society. The striking thing to me, as someone who cares a lot about the research and would love and spend my professional life trying to use reason and analysis and data to come to decisions, is that the one thing that everybody agrees upon is not the outcomes of the data and the research. That has ambivalent and ambiguous results. Again, you can look at it however you want to look at it. What everybody agrees upon is that this is a moral issue. So here's my Nixon to China thing. I do research all the time. I want to encourage you to set aside your own beliefs in any particular kind of research that says we know exactly what will happen if this law is reinstated, and instead reflect upon what's common among all of us, which is that we know that we're never worse off when we consider those among us who have the least as we make our decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Anyone else? Lisa? Thank you.
Is it on?
Just flip it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lisa Kubo, resident of Western Springs. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what was just said by Steve, in that, you know, one of the things that we've heard, and I think we know to be true, is that this is the right thing to do. We've all said this is a moral issue. And when you sit on a board and you are in power, your leadership, you're making the policy decisions. What is public policy? If not doing the right thing? Because when we supplant doing the right thing for people because of a fear that it might do to profits, something is really wrong. And I stand here as a business person, a business owner, who tries to do the right thing, and we're successful. I'm not afraid about going out of business if I treat my employees correctly, if I make sure that they're not infecting other people because they can take time off to heal or to be home with their child. And I really think that we can listen to all these great statistics, and I just want to point out a couple things. I addressed this board the first time it came up, and there was really a lot of unknowns. We didn't know what was going to happen, and there have been a lot of game changers since then, which I think I'm really proud of this board for readdressing the issue. Because, you know, one thing is, there was a parade of horribles that was paraded here by other speakers opposing it because they hired teenage workers, they had, part-time workers. They didn't know how this was going to affect them. And what we see now from this Cook County ordinance is those workers are exempted. It's not going to affect unionized workers. We know what that effect is now in Western Springs, because you know what? Cook County doesn't want to drive business out either. We're all concerned about having a vibrant community and businesses attracted to our community. So we know that now a lot of these workers that we thought might be impacted and the employers negatively impacted by them are not part of this ordinance. We know that now. Another really big game changer is the tax bill that came out, the federal tax bill, right? Reducing, C corporation tax rates from 35% to 21%. And even pass-through corporations, the first 20% of your business income completely deductible, that's meant to trickle down. So let it trickle down. So this, notion that, our businesses in this community might go out of business if they have to pay not even, what we might consider a living wage. When you look at, $8.25, is $17,160 if you multiply it by the 2080. That for some people here is a property tax payment. You raise it to $10 an hour, it's $20,800 a year. Nobody's getting rich, But they're not going to go out of business because now the federal government has given them the money to say you can do it. So the question I think we have to now ask ourselves as we reconsider is, why wouldn't we do it? It's the right thing to do. The Illinois Restaurant Association didn't even oppose the sick day ordinance because they understood how that it was good for business that they're not making people sick. When we go to our restaurants here, do you want to be worried about who's in the kitchen? My mother recently, I noticed she lives in Florida, and she was, becoming a little confused, and I got concerned, and I called the doctor, and I arranged for her to go to the doctor, and he hospitalized her, and I flew down there, and we didn't know if she had a stroke. We didn't know if it was kidney failure. You know what it turned out to be? Influenza A. Hospitalized for 4 days. Took her 3.5 weeks to recover. I was down there a month. Thank God I didn't have a healthcare worker come to take care of her with flu because she didn't want to stay home and miss her pay. So I think we really have to think about what's good for our community, what's good for our workers, and what's really the right thing to do, which we know in our heart. And you are in the enviable position, I feel, to be in a position to do something about it. And I ask that you do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Thank you for your comments. Moving on to our committee reports. First up, Public Works and Water, Trustee Yellen.
Thank you, President Gallagher. Unless anyone has a burning desire, I'll skip capital summary report in the interest of time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Move on to item B, well number 1 discussion. Our water plant superintendent, Erin Duffy, is here this evening, and she's going to give an abbreviated presentation for us on some additional findings on well number 1. So I'd like to turn it over to Erin.
Okay. So approximately 2 years ago, the board tasked the water department with exploring treatment options for well number 1. 3 of the treatment considerations were water quality, daily demand, or meeting daily demand, and total cost. At that time, we also had Baxter and Woodman assist us with the research into water surplus to provide us with a temporary RO skid and media filtration for iron removal. Can you go to the next slide? And these were just some of the logistics that came out of that study. So normal operation of well number 1 provides 780 gallons per minute to the reservoir of chlorinated well water. To the right, you will see what the normal operation of well number 1 produces as far as iron content and hardness. The iron content mixed with either well is approximately 15 times of what we see normally, and the hardness levels are about 4 times that what we would see normally if we had well number 3 and well number 4 in normal plant operation. So Baxter and Woodman did a study to see what the temporary RO skid and media filtration would provide for us. And it significantly reduces the production of well number 1 to 400 GPM, which is only about 500,000 gallons per day. And to the right, you will see the iron and hardness levels are pretty much returned to that of what we see in normal operation. So the average and maximum daily demand, I provided 2 different tables, and this is just an abbreviated version of what's in your agenda packet. The average demand that we saw in 2016 was 1.7 million gallons per day, and in 2017 it was again approximately 1.7 million gallons per day. But we also have a maximum daily demand, so that varies by month, and in peak months it can be as high as even 2.7 or 2.9 million gallons. So with the final treatment of well number 1 mixed with our treatment of well number 3 or well number 4, we're only able to get 2.1 million gallons with well number 3 or 1.9 million gallons with well number 4. So this table was meant to show with the green and the yellow and the red where we would have sat in 2016 or 2017 utilizing the RO production of well number 1. If you see the red, we would not have met daily demand at all. And the yellow shows that we would have only met daily demand if we had well number 3, which in our past water quality events, we did not have well number 3, we had well number 4. And then the next 2 slides just show even in off-peak months, we would run into issues with meeting daily demand that would require us to depressurize the temporary equipment and actually utilize well number 1 raw or chlorinated to the reservoir, so with no treatment. This is just a final total cost analysis that Baxter and Woodman provided in their study. The total cost, including the water treatment plant modifications, were almost $242,000 for 2 months of treatment, and that did not include the total cost for overtime for water treatment plant staff, because we would need to have somebody at the plant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week while this equipment was being utilized, because it would be utilized in a manual fashion. So the total cost for 2 months of treatment, which is approximately an overhaul of one of the deep wells, is just under $260,000. And unfortunately, it's the water department's opinion that this treatment option would not meet daily demand in all situations. Any questions?
So, but what's the alternative?
We don't have an alternative for well number 1 at this point.
But wouldn't limited output of well number 1 still be better than dumping all of untreated well number 1 into the mix, or not having well 1 operational at all?
For water quality, it would be, but for daily demand, it would not meet the demand needed. So we would need to find another option. And in some of the situations, if you can go back a couple of slides.
But wouldn't one option be some sort of a water restriction or water banning in conjunction with utilizing well number 1?
I don't think a water restriction would make up for 500,000 gallons per day. At least it hasn't in the past.
Okay, but I guess my question still is in lieu of treating well number 1, what you say we have no other option, so we would just...
We haven't explored any other options at this point.
Well, we have using well number 1 as is, what we have today.
Which I think our residents have been pretty clear is pretty much unacceptable in terms of the quality of the water. I mean, does anybody really...
Well, the village board provided direction to the village staff. You know, we are proceeding with the well number 5 route through the IEPA loan. The question that was really still on the table is it worth the village's investment to make the modifications at the water treatment plants, to have that as a backup, so to speak, in the time period that it takes for us to complete the well number 5 construction. Based on Aaron's analysis, the investment of the approximately $77,000, even if we move forward to that, it would not meet the scenarios that we needed to, based on the past 2 events that we've had, as well as a lot of the timeline, which you can see in the table that she's outlined here. So it's from staff's point of view that the investment would not accomplish what it would set out to do and what we need for it to do.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but even if we have it retrofitted and ready to go, we still need 24 to 48 hours of lead time before, is that correct?
Before the equipment would even be on site, and it's
Yes.
approximately 3 to 5 days before that equipment would be set up and ready to treat all of the water.
So really about a week?
Yes.
And by then the damage is done as far as the quality?
Well, initially on the outset, this would be a scenario where we would know that we would have a more significant problem with something in our production or distribution system, and it'd be for a longer term. So, for example, when we had one of the wells offline, we know that that's going to be a 4, 6, 8 week process. So yes, you're going to have some of those hiccups or issues up front, but as that extended period plays out, this equipment is what we were exploring. The scenario would be to address those areas.
Mm-hmm.
This would not have really been a solution that we could solve for those small time frames where you're only looking for a week because of the setup and mobilization time.
And Aaron, if you could, maybe to address Ed's comments a little more fuller, what happens with operationally with the plant in those summer months in the red here on your chart, both from like water pressure and what would happen if water input isn't meeting demand in some of those either days or months?
So, for example, and it really applies to any month, because as you can see in the other tables that I provided, even in our off-peak months, we come across days where demand is over 2 million gallons, and that could be due to a water main break or some other situation. And we would lose pressure in the system, which would require us to issue a boil order. So we would really want to avoid that, and in that situation, we would have to risk water quality and utilize well 1 chlorinated to the reservoir to avoid having to issue a boil order to maintain pressure in the system.
So thank you. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of great choices here. Also, there's a kind of a guesstimate, if you will, that doing well number 1 retrofit might not even be available until close to the end of this year. So the window of between when well number 1 could be used and well number 5 hopefully will be up and running. We're trying to keep that as narrow as possible, and that could only be maybe 12 months-ish if well number 5 comes up in 2019 as well. So we heard this on Friday at our Public Works and Water Committee. There's no other data that we're looking for. I think over the last year, the department has done a really good job of answering all the questions that we had. So they're looking, and we're looking for just some consensus if we want to move forward on this or focus our efforts on getting well number 5 up and going, and there's going to be an update on well number 5 as well later. So I guess I'm interested in your all feedback on what you've heard and over tonight and over the last year.
So how realistic is 2019 for well number 5?
Wait, pardon?
I'm sorry, how realistic is 2019 for well number 5?
So you're going to hear an update on that in a minute, but I'll let Director Supert address that comment.
Or should we proceed to your report on
Yeah,
well
why
number
don't
5? Why don't we do that?
We can
Why don't
segue
we
into
do
that.
that?
And I just wanted to say that this, if the board can please remember that you asked staff to explore the possibility of using well number 1, and it is staff's recommendation that we do not go ahead with well number 1 or this type of treatment solution. So because of the money, and also because we need to concentrate on our efforts on well number 5 right now. So, but here's Director Supert.
Before we do that, Trustee Allen, can you explain about that? You said it might not even be to the end of the year to have this plan.
So we would have to incur additional consulting costs to get a firm timeline. The retrofit to to the water treatment plant so that it could accept these temporary skids, You know, we're guesstimating that's like a 6 to 8 month process if we were to start today. So that's why I threw out end of the year.
So really, this year's gone already?
Pretty much.
So this insurance would be for just 1 year, and
Correct.
at the best.
Correct.
Best case scenario.
And as Village Manager Velke said, it is staff's recommendation not to go down this route from, you know, it creates some operational issues for the plant.
Sorry I interrupted.
No, that's
Dr. Super.
I'm going to ask for feedback again, but I'll go back into well number 5 since that got brought up. In your packet was some information from Baxter and Woodman, and there were a couple line items highlighted, and that's really kind of the crux of it. When we voted a few months ago to accept well number 5, you know, we had talked about a low $3 million cost estimate for well number 5. What we learned recently is that estimate was predicated on 24 hours of operation to construct the well number 5. So if we were to switch to kind of normal operations, you know, normal village operations for construction, the estimate is that could add about 3 months and up to around about $500,000 of additional costs over what we've discussed. Also highlighted was part of the installation of well number 5, the casing installation and the 24-hour pumping has to be 24-hour operation, and that would be about 30 days that would be required. So there's sort of two components. One, we have to do a 24-hour operation just to get the well to be installed correctly, and the other part is the original estimate prepared by Baxter and Woodman contemplated basically around the clock work. And while you might think that might be more expensive due to overtime, apparently it's actually lower cost because they can complete the job in a shorter amount of time. So, Director Super, do you want to have anything to add or highlight on that? Because it is an important point.
Sure, yeah, I'll just kind of elaborate. So now that we've had the forward direction from the board to pursue the well number 5 project, we're proceeding forward with the IEPA loan process. We had a kickoff meeting approximately a week and a half ago with Baxter Woodman to begin conversations about the logistics of the project. We did a site walkthrough near Field Park, and you can see from the agenda from that meeting, there was a number of issues that we kind of had preliminary conversations about how this would proceed. Also included in here is a preliminary timeline of the project schedule, what we'll be looking at. I'll elaborate that on a little bit in a second. But as Trustee Allen mentioned, the two kind of main topics that we want to discuss with the board, which staff is really going to look for direction on the board from that, is the drilling operation hours. It's been brought to our attention that through these conversations from this preliminary kickoff meeting that drilling operations for well construction typically is a 24-hour operation. That being in the proximity to the residential neighborhoods that the well's probably going to be built in may present an issue. We did talk with Baxter Woodman about what those operations look like. It's not going to be loud in the sense of that it's pile driving or something like that, but you're going to have diesel generators or diesel engines running on site during the construction operations while the drill is being sent down into the ground. So there's going to be some noise on the site that would come into play. One of the other topics that we still need to finalize is we've had preliminary conversations with the Park District, but we do need to finalize the exact location of where the well might go in the Field Park. That might come into play a little bit regarding the proximity, some of the neighboring residential area, about where that well is and how that comes into play. So I do want to open that up for a conversation to get some feedback from the board. As Trustee Allen said, there is potentially a cost impact with that, with the extended time frame. Could be up to 20% of the project cost. We won't know exactly until we get the final bids. It kind of depends on the contractors who bid that, so we won't know that for a few more months. The project timeline that you see here, this is kind of preliminary timeline that we're working off based on the IEPA documentation that we received and coordinated with the IEPA. You can see that we're looking for a late 2019 roughly project completion for the well, and there's a separate section in the table here for the water main distribution, the transmission main from where the well would be constructed to the water treatment plant. We'll have to begin here sometime probably later this, I think it's identified either this summer to start development of the bid documentation, and we would be going out to bid later this year for the project.
Director Super, can you please elaborate on the drilling? I know that when we talked in committee, once they get in and it's in the ground, then the noise is not as prominent, correct?
Yeah, and that's where it's largely based on the actual machinery, the diesel engines that you would have on site that would. So again, it's not a pile driving type sound. There is absolutely going to be some noise. You can see that we're having the project, at least the initial kickoff phase, targeted for over the winter. There is some thought that, being that people would have windows closed, there may be some temperament to the noise that people would hear initially. We are hoping to coordinate with Baxter Woodman to maybe go on site to see where another well is being constructed in the state to get an idea of what that sound level might be like. That we've had a preliminary conversation, so that might happen in the next month or so with staff to kind of get an idea of what we're looking at.
And how long will that sound last? Is that throughout the project?
It would essentially be the duration of the project.
Which is a year?
Approximately a year. You have, it's a little bit shorter than that. The actual construction period is in that 6 to 8 month time frame. Depending on what we do with the operational hours, that could impact that. Also, as well as what happens, how much development we need to do after the well is actually finally drilled. The development essentially is where we begin flushing water out of the well until we get the water quality that we're looking for. Depending on what that, that could be a few days, but that could be, as Trustee Allen mentioned, up to 30 days, and that's on a per site basis.
Do you have any picture of what the lighting effects would be?
Not at this time.
24 hours?
No, we don't have any at this time.
Is there anything to be done to mute that sound? Like temporary structure or something that you could rent or?
We would look into whether it'd be feasible to do any sort of fencing. Yeah, fencing that could potentially mute that. We don't know again at this point because we just had this preliminary kickoff meeting about a week and a half ago. So we're going to be investigating that stuff over the next month. But we wanted to bring this to the board's attention so you're aware about it. You can begin thinking about it, begin talking about it.
So I would ask that consideration be given along with a barrier for the sound, but also for the lighting.
Absolutely.
That be explored.
So I'm going to revert back. Thank you for the feedback on well number 5, because I have a few more comments on that, but unrelated. Well number 1, I felt our view from the Public Works and Water sounded kind of complicated. I'm sympathetic to your comment, Trustee Timmick, about water quality. But switching from kind of the devil we know to something we may not know, and based on kind of the additional work Plant Superintendent Duffy did, we did not come to any kind of conclusion to recommend this. So I just want to make sure you all concur with that, because we're going to be no worse off than we are today, and hoping that well number 5 gets to a speedy construction and conclusion.
I don't support moving ahead with any costs associated with telling us more than what we already know about the conclusion of that discussion on well number 1.
So does that mean don't go forward with well number 1?
I support the recommendations that are made by the village staff.
The staff, okay. Anyone else?
This is just kind of a naive question, but if we're going to save $260,000, could some of that be used on some of these amenities for well number 5?
But it's not saving, it's just not spending.
All right, we're not spending, but we're thinking about possibly doing it for 1 year and a 1-year insurance policy. I mean, can you?
Well, I think anything that we can do to keep our water rates competitive is going to be well received by our residents. But, it is, water quality is very sensitive on the second point on that. So I don't mean to minimize it, but I just want to make sure we're in all knowledge about what we're recommending. So
I had a question about this table just to make sure I understand. So using 2016 as an example, if I understand, with well number 3 combined with well number 1 RO,
right,
there were 4 days that we didn't meet production, the red. Is it, are
Months.
those
Months.
days, those are
Those are
full
months.
months?
Yeah.
Those are full months.
Those are full months?
Yes,
So we would be out the entire month?
yes.
And also days in some of the other months.
Okay, and if, to your point, we went ahead and did it and we were short, and we could still max the 2.1 million, what would be the actual impact to the water plant? To make sure I understand what you were saying there.
It's not an impact to the water plant. If we're too short, meaning we don't have enough water in our tanks, we risk running into low pressure in distribution. And if you go under 20 PSI in distribution, you have to issue a boil order.
Okay, because it starts to dredge up stuff from the, okay.
But it's also, you have to decommission the RO, right? And like kind of convert it over back to
So if we
well
were to
number one.
switch from treating well 1 to just chlorinating well 1 and putting it into the reservoir, we would have to make, obviously, some connection changes, as well as depressurize and drain that RO skid in the meantime.
Okay.
And we haven't talked to Water Surplus about how long that would take, so, I mean, there could be some considerable time consideration there, too.
Okay, and then just one last question, sorry, in terms of the treatment of well number 1 water, the chlorinating is to make it, I'll say, drinkable, but it wouldn't be treated for hardness and the mineral content, so we would get the gold brown sort of
Yes.
coloring, but to your point, it's safe to drink.
Yes, it's safe to drink, completely safe to drink.
Okay. Thanks, that helps.
Other trustees? We haven't quite heard a consensus yet, so I don't want to preclude your input.
Well, I seem to be the doubting Thomas, but based on that explanation, I would suggest we not spend the money for well number 1. I just want to make sure I fully understood the issue before.
Oh, absolutely, fair.
I agree with the staff recommendation too. There's no great.
All right, well, thank you.
Right, it's just not a great option, so.
It's
Not, I can be enthusiastic.
It's not an enthusiastic response, fair enough. One other point on well number 5, so Director Super correctly said that the actual location in Field Park is still not determined, whether it's sort of on the east end, the west end, somewhere in between. But related to that is also sort of what the actual above-ground structure would look like. I think at a minimum, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Super, think about maybe like a small one-car garage is sort of the minimum that we would have to have. There's some discussion whether we would take an opportunity to enhance what might be out there, either bathrooms, drinking fountains, stuff like that. That's not in this budget right now, but that is something that at least has been put out there. So I just wanted to make you guys all aware. No decision on that has been made. Do you have anything to add on that, Director Super?
No, that's a perfect summary, really. We'll just have to see how those conversations play out with the Park District and well as the opinion from the board.
And certainly cost would be a factor.
And it would be more of a decorative house, I think.
Right.
So.
Well, but fair enough. It's my nomenclature, a small one-car garage, but a decorative one small car garage, I guess. Are there any questions on well number 1, well number 5 on that?
Trustee, why are there variables with where they're going to put it in Field Park? I mean, is it depend on something with the water table?
Well, there's all kinds of, well, I'll let Director Super answer as well, but there's all kinds of trade-offs. If you want to be close to the school, you'll impact the school more than the residents. If you want to interfere with
so there's
the
policy
fields,
Right.
The further you move east, it makes it further from the water plant, which adds a little bit more cost because you have to run further pipe. And then there's also a lot of trees out on that location, especially on the east side of that park. So, the impact on our trees or on our mature trees as well, too. So you're trying to balance all those trade-offs, and you're also working with the park board as well, and what they're trying to do with, that park to make it as utilizable for our residents as possible.
Will this be our decision, where to put it, or can we just?
We want to work as closely as we can with the Park District. There is space out there that is village right-of-way that we can put it on, but we want to be good neighbors. We're even if the location of the well itself is on village right-of-way, the larger construction site almost certainly will impact some park land in some way. So we want to work hand in hand with them as much as we can.
And also, there is a constraint near Clausen, right, in terms of what other sewer lines are already in the ground, in terms of where we could actually physically put the well?
Correct, yeah. There's been some conversations about its proximity near Clawson, also in south of Ellington where the cul-de-sac is. And there's just some IEPA separation guidelines. There's some sanitary sewer that runs through there that services that subdivision. It runs down towards Hillgrove. We have to have certain separation guidelines. So, and that's all conversations we'll have to have with the Park District when we kind of take the next step in the conversation.
So, but we do need to resolve these relatively quickly, right?
Yeah, I think over this next month, we're going to kind of, again, this was our first kind of kickoff meeting with this project. We've had very preliminary conversations with the Park District. Over the next month is, I think, when things will really start to develop with the Park District. And again, I want to get feedback from the board about some of these other topics as we begin, because we'll be kicking off probably some of the design documentation for the well here probably in the next couple of months.
You need that resolved before we go out for bid, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So more to come, but it's absolutely a fair question on that. All right, going last chance on wells. All right, item D, hydrant flushing. Most residents probably received a card in the mail that's actually going to start next week. This is kind of an annual process. It accomplishes a couple things. One, it exercises the joints on the hydrants, and then also helps to reduce some of any debris or whatever that may be in the water line. So we do get a couple benefits out of doing that. But there will be, it is also posted on our website, the dates on that, but that is kind of a normal routine type maintenance that we do. Item E, Ridgewood Oak Detention Basin, structural engineering. So as you recall, this is the detention wall that we would like to install in the Ridgewood Oaks condominium to help reduce flooding during large storm events. And I'm going to have to ask a couple questions on this because part of this we didn't have time to go over completely in our committee. This project, as you may recall, was originally budgeted for $300,000 last year. During some of the design work, it was discovered that there was concrete in the soil. That kind of put a wrench in the plan a little bit. And we deferred the project until 2018. J.J. Bennis, our village engineer, was working on this in 2017. It was brought to the, and then we also upped the budget $50,000 in light of the debris that was found, because that would impact kind of the quality and the construction for this wall. But what you'll see in your packet is a bid from ESCA Consultants. What I learned is that we have a civil engineer, and now this is a structural engineer. And as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff or Matt, what they want to do, what staff is recommending, is to have somewhat of a subcontractor relationship, Attorney Drusik, where ESCA would be underneath J.J. Bennis. And the part that I'm a little bit fuzzy on is this $30,000 part of the extra $50,000 that we've added, and what's the new total budget for this project?
Sure. So the $50,000 we added was just for the construction component. So I'll back up just a little bit to give a summary of why we're utilizing the structural engineer. So as Trustee Allen mentioned, there is a detention basin in the Ridgewood Oaks subdivision. It is currently permitted by MWRD and owned by the subdivision, but it is upstream of the village's storm sewer system in Ridgewood that drains towards Flag Creek. As you recall, back in 2015, we did the Ridgewood infrastructure study to identify problems in that subdivision. And this was one of the locations that also kind of came up during that study. The village reached out last year to the homeowners association out there to get them to improve and bring that detention basin back up to its permitted capacity and requirements. The homeowners association ultimately will pay for this construction cost on the end. There is going to be a public-private share component that we still need to work out on that. And we talked with Attorney Drusik a little bit about that. But this past summer, as part of the soil boring samples, we found that there was very poor soils out at the location, and there was concrete and some other debris that was found in the soil. Reason why that's driving the conversation is staff had an early meeting with the HOA and all of its members, I would say about February last year, to approach them about the improvements on this. And Village is really driving the show, even though HOA will ultimately pay for the improvements through an SSA. The Village is kind of coordinating it to get this improvement implemented. The two primary improvement methodologies we could use for this is to build a retaining wall, or we could build a berm for the west side of the detention basin. The negative impacts of the berm is because of the width that it requires in the excavation, we would lose a lot of mature oak trees and landscaping, and it would probably very negatively impact the quality of life for the residents over there. During our conversations with them during the HOA meeting, they preferred to go with the retaining wall, even understanding that there may have been an additional cost to that. And that's where we went into our soil boring conversations and investigations. Those completed last fall. Our initial engineering that we had targeted for this project was approximately $70,000. $30,000 was spent at the completion of last year, and we rolled $40,000 over this year. That did not include this extensive of structural engineering work for two reasons. A, we didn't really know at the time initially when we budgeted in the beginning of 2017 if we would be going with the retaining wall option or the berm. And B, now that we have the soil boring samples and we understand what the soil conditions are out there, that is impacting the design and the participation level that the structural engineer needs to be involved in this project.
So I'm sorry, is the total budget now 350,000 or 300?
That's the construction budget. That does not include the engineering component.
So last year we were talking 300.
Correct.
Okay, so was everything, construction and engineering?
No, that was just construction.
So, what's the total now? Because I guess I'm still kind of confused.
So for construction, we have $350,000 budgeted. There was $30,000 expended last year for approximately $30,000, and I think it's in the capital report for James J. Benison Associates for engineering. We have approximately $40,000, $45,000 in that line item this year for additional James J. Benison Association engineering. And then we didn't have any structural engineering identified as part of this project. All those investigations were still ongoing last fall when we were going through the budget process.
I'm sorry, what's the total?
So you have 350, somebody got a calculator? 425.
425.
That includes all the engineering and the construction costs.
It looks like in the memo from ESCA that we paid them some amount already in 2017. They did some work for us.
That was the soil boring analysis work that we had to do with them last year.
Okay. So in any event, staff recommended a $30,000 or not to exceed. And the part of it was inspection. Is that an overlap with inspection with J.J. Bennis, or is that a separate inspection?
Jeff, do you want to elaborate on the inspection component?
So anytime there is structural work involved, from that aspect of the project, the structural engineer wants to be involved in looking at the soils, but also the conditions under which the walls and things are being built, because there is a significant risk to the wall structurally and we want to have them involved in that process.
Okay. And do the homeowners know what of these revised costs? I mean, what has been communicated with
So we've been in contact with the president of the HOA as well as the property manager. We had a conference call with them in the end of February to give them an outline, and we're in the process right now of trying to schedule an actual follow-up meeting. We were supposed to have one in March, but it got canceled with the HOA board again and give them a full rundown. They have a general idea that there are additional costs from the poor soils, and the preliminary conversation we've had with the property manager as well as the board president is that they still want to proceed forward with the retaining wall option.
As opposed to the berm?
Correct.
Okay. So we recommended that this 30,000 additional, which will require a budget amendment, not to exceed 30,000, be voted on an omnibus in the next meeting in 2 weeks. Okay. But I do have a question for Attorney Jarusik on this. Is this subcontractor concept with J.J. Bennis, is that anything unique that we would need to do?
Can I ask a question? And in responding to you, can I just get a follow-up question from Matt before I respond to that?
Absolutely.
I heard you just correctly, 2017, we did work with ESCA, is that correct? This engineering company?
James and Ben is contracted with them to coordinate for the soil boring work.
Okay, but did we pay for the bill? I mean, have they done work for the village before?
Yes, they have.
Yeah, so they're an existing engineering company that's done work. They're a vendor of the Village of Western Springs.
Yes, they've worked in the past, I think, typically as a subcontractor.
Okay, so we don't have any issues under the Professional Selection, Local Government Selection Act, which requires us to go through a special RFQ process for architects, engineers, and surveyors. So we're okay there. And yes, they can. I mean, ultimately, it's a vendor cost that's going to be passed on to the homeowners association.
Well, it's a split between the homeowners association and the village.
Some percentage.
Some percentage to be determined.
To be determined, and usually in these projects, the village pays anywhere from 5, 10, 15, 20% of public benefit on a project like this. I think we had that estimated at some number.
Yeah, we've loosely talked, I think, in that range.
In that range.
We still need to kind of, I think our intent was, once we have it designed, we could break down from the quantities list, from the specifications, and get a better idea of what is the public component and what is the private component. And then we would follow back up with the HOA and bring those costs back to them, and it would be implemented through a special service area.
Yeah, the idea, Trustee Allen, this is a pass-through. I mean, I look at this contract as really, it's a village vendor that we've retained before and we've paid for services before. No different here. I think the idea of the pass-through is really, James J. Bennis doesn't have a structural engineering firm on staff. This is a specialty engineering consultant, who is not only giving advice to the homeowners association, but to the village and to Bennis in this project. So, I see it as a village vendor that you are approving, who's going to coordinate and work, with staff and with Bennis. So I would just put it on the agenda as a straight-up village approval of this vendor contract.
And just mechanics again on payment. Does the village pay all engineering, and the construction part is where there's this public benefit, or is it an aggregate percentage for the overall project?
We haven't discussed the specifics about that yet, really.
And in a typical special assessment or special service area type project, it's usually the entire project cost plus consulting costs get totaled up and get, spread across, the project, and the folks in the homeowners association are going to pay a percentage, whether it's 70 or 80 or 90%, and then the village is going to take, the balance of that percentage and pay that as public benefit. So, all costs, all vendor costs, all construction costs, I think should be lumped together and put in a total, and then we divide it based on public benefit, private benefit, and I don't think we allocate, we're going to pay engineering, they pay construction. I think everybody shares everything.
Did you have a question?
No, I don't. Thanks. No.
Okay. I mean, that's not unsimilar to what we're doing on the Rose repair, right, where it's going to be an assessment that they're going to pay over time on their...
Yep. All of our special service area and special assessment projects have been funded the same way. Where the village has paid public benefit, it's been some small percentage, and the balance has been paid by the residents or the homeowners association, the private folks who are paying their portion of the bill.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? All right, moving on, sidewalk policy. So in your packet is a memo on the sidewalk policy, just a little bit of a backstory. The sidewalk, the village has long had of an objective or a goal or a vision of installing sidewalks throughout the village. Some communities are pretty much done, and some have none, and some have somewhere in between. It seems to be something that doesn't always unite us, and there's a lot of different opinions on it. So that's the kind of the sidewalk policy in a nutshell. But we were approached about a year ago by a resident on Hampton Avenue, and he had somewhat of a unique situation where, unfortunately, I have a big Google map official thing, and I don't know if Director Supert in his wizardry can pull that up on the fly. I didn't ask him in advance. But in any event, his situation is he's in between two homes that do have sidewalks all the way to the curbs, and so his yard, which is on village right away, by the way, does get people walking across, and he's asked us if the village would contribute to him doing any kind of cost share for him to install a sidewalk. So it took us a while because we focused on the water treatment options for a new well, but we did run this through the Infrastructure Commission, and then we met and discussed it on Friday. And I think the view was we were very sympathetic for the resident that's in this situation. However, we were also very concerned about two things primarily. One was just kind of a fairness where essentially village residents in whatever section they are have had to pay the full cost, whether it was a new construction or something that was built earlier. And then also, so there was that kind of fairness issue on that point. And then also, as you may recall, the budget for sidewalk improvement, we go through as a village department checking sidewalks throughout the year and trying to make repairs to keep them in a proper shape of maintenance. That had been running about $50,000 a year. We had to increase it this year to $75,000. That's really just to keep up with sidewalks that fail, that we do pretty much sidewalk square by sidewalk square, or if they become a tripping hazard. And so the issue was relative to cost, if they're, what this would cost for the village to try to implement something like this and make it a policy where people could kind of come to us and ask for some sort of 70-30 or some other type of cost-sharing arrangement. The cost of a sidewalk can vary a lot depending on what's on your yard, whether you have big trees, the quality and slope of your driveway, the length of your yard, and so forth. But think about a $5,000 to $10,000 is kind of covering most different types of scenarios. So with all that, and after a lengthy discussion, we concluded not to go ahead with changing the sidewalk policy at this time for those two main reasons. And we just wanted to make sure that you're in agreement with that. And that was how the memo was a very complete memo, but that was how it was drafted with that recommendation from our committee.
I think it's too dangerous of a precedent. Even if we went 30%, I don't know how many other homes there are that'll come to us next year saying, hey, you did it for him, you got to do it for us. I mean, if I had a better idea that there was only 12 homes, but I think there's a lot more, just from my understanding.
Yeah, fair point, yeah. And there's actually this map here that I pulled that shows on Western Avenue near that location that there's several houses without sidewalks where some neighbors do have it. So you're right, we did talk about the precedent concept and what that might do to the overall village budget and trying to keep up with sort of the existing sidewalks that we do have. I also should point out, as was mentioned in the memo, that the resident wanted to do this. We weren't requiring him and her to do it, and we're not, they're welcome to do it at their cost. So it's not they're not prevented from doing it. Okay. And lastly, in terms of other, we did have a conversation about our two main road projects this year, which is Johnson Avenue and Lawn Avenue. And I pinned Director Supert briefly this evening and asked if we could get kind of an update to the whole board on what those are, and particularly the Lawn Avenue one, by between post office and the hardware store, and what the village is kind of recommending to do for that. And Johnson Avenue would be impacted by the Tischler Green site as well, and extending the road construction down into that area as well too. So more to come, but I did want to just give you an update that is something that's kind of floating around, and I hope we can get a more complete update for you in the near future. So unless there are any questions, thank you, and that concludes my report, President Gallagher.
Thank you, Trustee Allen. I'm going to go out of order, Trustee Hanson.
Oh, sure.
I apologize, but in consideration of the public that's in our audience, I think that perhaps you're waiting for the report from the General Government Committee. So we'll switch over to Trustee Timmick.
Thank you, President Gallagher. So just 2 items this evening. So the first is, in fact, the minimum wage and paid sick leave topic. We covered this again at our committee meeting earlier this evening. What we've decided to do at this point is I think people are ready to make a decision and take some action. So we will make the recommendation as a committee that we put this on the agenda for the 23rd to take a vote. It will not be part of the omnibus, so we'll be able to vote on this as standalone topics. And that's the other thing, as discussed before, it will be voted on as both a standalone minimum wage and then also a standalone sick leave approach there. And there will actually be, I believe, Attorney Drusik can help me out here, just make sure I get it right. There'll be upwards of 4 motions. What we will do is we'll first vote to remain out.
Status quo.
Status quo.
On minimum wage, then a motion status quo on sick leave, depending on how those go.
We would then make,
move to the next set of motions, which would be motion to opt into sick leave, motion to opt into minimum wage. And if those pass, I need to draft ordinances in order to make those happen. Those ordinances would follow if the votes were favorable at the next meeting. I don't, the recommendation of the general government was to wait for the consensus and the direction from the board before drafting any ordinances. In this way, at the next meeting, you could give that direction on each particular item, and then the ordinances would follow, and then they would be on the omnibus at the following meeting, depending on how the votes turned out.
Attorney Drusik, could you repeat that again, procedurally, how we're going to?
Sure. My suggestion was 4 motions on the next agenda. There'd be a motion to status quo on minimum wage, motion status quo on sick leave. So you wouldn't have to take any action. There'd be no ordinances. The ordinances you adopted last year would remain in effect. The village would be opted out of both of the Cook County programs. The next level of motions that would be on the agenda would be motions to opt into the minimum wage program, and then our next motion would be a motion to opt into the sick leave benefit program. If those were successful, then staff, we would prepare an ordinance for each of those items that could be transmitted to Cook County for their purposes to reflect where the village sits after that round of voting.
And so let me maybe address where you might be going. So the reason we decided to take this approach were 2 things. One, as Attorney Drusik mentioned, is to avoid potentially unnecessary work drafting the ordinances if the vote goes that way. The second thing is what we did not want to do is put on the agenda that we're taking a vote to opt back in and have the ordinances prepared to look that way so that people would assume we were going one way or the other. So the idea is to make it clear that there is a conscious effort to make sure we decide to go in, and then if we decide to go in, prepare the ordinances accordingly.
And thank you. The first two ordinances where you're using the term status quo. I thought status quo was, we talked about having a timeline of the end of last year.
So status quo, so the status quo is to remain opted out. We discussed this
Indefinitely?
at the committee meeting, because what we passed originally was to opt out with no end date, but with a commitment to revisit it. So if we remain opted out, we don't have to do anything additional.
Okay.
So that's the approach we're going to take, again, trying to just be clear about what our approach is and not lead anybody to any conclusions based on what the agenda item might look like coming up on the 23rd. So if that's agreeable with everybody, that's the approach we'll take.
But that's totally agreeable. Can I just ask a couple questions? Thanks. Ms. Quinlan's comment about if a Western Springs Village services a resident in Countryside that is opted in, how does that work? Do they have to pay minimum wage while the person's actually working in Countryside? And it's the obligation of the village of that business that they have to differentiate on their employment?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And just so I'm also clear, I think you had recommended that these ordinances will be exactly how the Cook County ones are written. So if we thought some wage in between 8.25 and 13 is more reasonable, that's not going to be on the
Not an
table at all.
option. It's either in or out.
Yeah, we
It's either
can't
in
do
or
that.
out.
Yep.
And unions are exempt, and also Cook County elected to exempt government workers, right?
Public
Correct.
employees,
Public employees.
public employers.
Yes.
Public employers are exempt, unionized labor is exempt.
So school districts would also be exempt?
Correct.
Then? Okay, thank you.
And the effective date would, if we were to opt back in, would be July 1st?
That would be up to you. It could be effective as of the date that you take the vote, but then it has to be approved by a 2/3 majority. Otherwise, if it's approved by a simple majority, an ordinance takes effect 10 days after its vote.
Thank you.
Anything else on that? No? Okay. And then one other topic, just pretty quickly, under other business, we did discuss the agreement that we have currently in place with the French Market. The contract as it stands now is valid through 2019, but they did approach us and asked about potentially starting earlier, so mid-May. It would be 3 additional Sundays, and that is key. It would stay on Sunday. We as a committee found that acceptable, and so we would put that on an omnibus to basically add a contract addendum changing the start date for the market. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Timmick. Moving back to Properties and Rec Committee, Trustee Hansen.
Okay, thank you, President Gallagher. The first item on my agenda is the capital summary report, which I will just be very brief about that because you do have all that information in your packet. The East Train platform is coming along. You might have noticed that they've been working on the electrical, and they have opened the platform. The walkway is now opened. As of May 1st, Passion Construction will be, those will be days that they'll be charged for work as a work day to meet the deadline and everything. So we're moving along on the East Train platform. The next item I'm going to skip, it's the Bemis Bike Path. I'm just going to skip that for a minute. I'm just going to talk briefly about the water tower. We talked last month, I believe, about the historic water tower needs a new front door, and that is a custom door. It has not started yet. It will likely be a fall project, but they are, it will get done this year. Correct, Matt? Yes. And then the next item on the capital summary report is the HVAC system for the fire station and the main one here next door. That system is currently 27 years old, so it is being replaced this fall. And again, they're going to wait until the fall. It has not yet started. So that's the capital summary report in a nutshell. The next item is the vehicle purchase update. As you recall, I believe it was last month or 2 months ago, there was an error on an estimate given to us by Shorewood Home and Auto for the purchase of a John Deere 3046R compact tractor, and they had forgotten to include the cost of the cab in their quote that they gave us. So we have, in your packet, there's quite a bit of information from the John Deere company itself. And they have given us a quote for the tractor for $43,984.08. This is the bid pricing used by the Illinois Association of County Board Members. And the Shorewood Home and Auto Company will be the delivery dealer, but we will actually be making the purchase through the vendor, John Deere. So the committee recommends approving this purchase and putting this on the omnibus for the new compact tractor.
We'll do that, thank you.
Okay. The next item, moving on, is the Bemis Woods Bike Path. This is the bike path, again, that is up near Ogden Avenue, near Bemis Woods. Originally, we had said that it was going to be on the west side of Wolf Road. We've been holding meetings with the Forest Preserve District of Cook County and the Cook County Highway Department. And they at first we had decided that it was going to be on the west side of Wolf Road. And then some residents came and brought it to our attention that they did not necessarily think that that was the safest location for this bike path. And there were some suggestions made about possibly changing the route of the path. So in meetings with the Forest Preserve District and with Cook County, they were agreeable to perhaps letting us have a different path, different route. And we were presented at our committee level, which they're in your packets. I don't know, do we have it, Matt, for up here or no, the map or anything?
I could pull the map up vertically if you give me a second here.
Anyway, one of the routes was to go west. You would cross at Ogden and Wolf, and you would travel west back into the Forest Preserve more. And the Forest Preserve, that's what they said, they would be willing to go along with that one and everything. But then a suggestion was made that instead of going all the way west, that you would cross at Ogden and Wolf, and you would go a little bit west, and then you would go a little bit north, and then you would come back a little bit east and go north along on Wolf Road, kind of making like a horseshoe, I believe. And on your, you can, is it on?
Yes, it's on.
Okay, it's on your computer monitor.
I'll zoom in a little bit.
So it's kind of hard to read the letters, but the new proposal would be to go from point A to point G to point, no point, then the yellow and the blue, and then back to D. So do you see, it would be like making a U-shaped type of thing. That was a proposal made by President Gallagher at the committee level, and but we do not know if the Forest Preserve would allow that. We don't know if the Cook County Highway Department will go along with it. The other issue with this bike path is that neither the Forest Preserve District nor the Cook County Highway want to assume ownership of this once it is constructed. And as you can see in your packet, there are some concerns about this doing it this way, as you know, the village is basically building a bike path that is outside of the village boundaries. So we would have to make sure that the liability of the village is, you know, taken care of, that there's not a problem with that. And there are some concerns also about postponing this project, because it will, if we change the path from the one that we had originally talked about, which was just going straight north on Wolf Road, if we change the path, there will be additional costs for environmental and preliminary engineering work and other costs that would be associated anytime you make a change. So we are still meeting. The village staff is still meeting with the Forest Preserve District and the Cook County Highway Department. But my guess is that we will not have anything to vote on or anything anytime soon on this, correct?
Yeah, really, it's just to solicit feedback on the proposed kind of options here. It came, you know, from our committee meeting. This green to blue to yellow kind of bypass, we're hoping can address some of the concerns that were brought up by the residents who came to the meeting a few months ago. Hopefully that also will not be a significant change to the Federal Highway Administration in terms of the project scope. So we're working through those, and I just want to get some feedback from the board if that's a direction we proceed forward with. I do want to add just one other item on here. Since our conversations about a month ago, the Forest Preserve District has formally removed their request for the expanded project scope to the north.
I was just going to say that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean
no,
that.
that's okay. No, but that they don't require us anymore to go what they had wanted us to go further north.
All the way to the bridge.
Correct. Past the bridge.
Well, they want us to go past the bridge. It will go all the way to the bridge, correct?
We're basically, no, so with the current one, we would basically be interfacing where, up here to the north, where the current trail comes out just south of the bridge. That was our original project scope, and now that they've rescinded their expanded scope request, that's where we would again be terminating. Assuming we proceed up along the west side of Wolf Road.
Right.
May I ask?
Sure.
Director Super, thank you. The blue line, I think decided that they will not connect the blue line into that cul-de-sac, that street there.
Yeah, it's my understanding, and Jeff, feel free to jump in, they do not want to, and you can see that from the proposed routes that are on here, want to dump any pedestrians or bicyclists onto the parking or roadway in Bemis Woods. So everything that occurred during the conversations, followed with them, all had to interface back with the existing path somewhere.
Okay. Well, what's this yellow line leading out to?
So this was one of the additional options that was discussed during the meeting. So the yellow path, where it's connecting to the white one on Wolf Road, there's an existing MWRD sewer that connects through there. And that is actually very similar to one of the very first proposals that the village approached the Forest Preserve with. It wasn't allowed back at that time. This was all the way back in 2010, but it was brought back up again during our conversations here. And really, the option that was looking at here is to proceed on the north side of where this parking area is. A lot of that is grass, but then you would have to cut through the forested area. There may be a maintenance path through there. I don't remember exactly from the conversations that you could interface. There would still need to be a significant amount of tree removals that would occur that we would have to interface.
How do you
with
get to it?
So this would be most likely, well, you have a couple options. You could either have the existing from Ogden heading north along the west side of Wolf and then cut in west through the MWRD sewer easement. If you drive up on Wolf Road, you'll see there's a large swath that's cut through the trees there. That's the MWRD sewer where this would be.
Don't we run into the same problem going
Yes.
up north on Wolf Road that everybody was
Possibly,
objecting to?
yeah. And it seems like from the conversations that we've had, at least from the resident comments earlier, that their highest concern was down here by Wolf when you have the closer proximity to the road, just because of how tight that area is. And that's why I think why the committee came to the kind of compromise of, if you take the green, come into the woods here, maybe you get a more scenic and landscaped route of it, and then you could swing back up here, back through that MWRD section, and then continue north. We have much greater separation from the road to where the path would be once we continue north from here. It's just this southern section where we have the path is much closer to the road edge.
And the blocked out wall that I think somebody had spoken about that, like they have in North Riverside, that was just too costly?
Really comes down to, and Jeff can elaborate a little bit, is what they call warrants.
Warrants, right.
Yeah, and I think there is some follow-up going on that, but you have to meet those standards, and if you don't meet those standards, you can't really put a guard or barrier or anything in that isn't officially kind of, I don't want to say sanctioned, but meets the guidelines set forth by the Federal Highway Administration.
Well, what are these warrants, though? Is it attached to a cost, or is it something that they have, the Forest Preserve has, or the highway?
It'd be a Federal Highway Administration, and their guidelines based on a bunch of different measurements, sight lines, traffic speed, separation, and things like that.
So they'll say, you can't do this. It's not something we have a choice over.
Right, it's an engineering study, which would then determine whether the warrants were met to install this, and it would make a determination on whether the warrant for the barrier that you're putting in is actually more dangerous than not having a barrier inside there. There's an entire engineering study that would have to be done for that.
Any other comments or questions? So this is really just for your information, but and then that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Hansen. Moving on to our Finance Committee, Trustee Rudolph.
Thank you, President Gallagher. In your packets, you saw the information about the promissory note bids and the results of those, and also that Attorney Jerusik has recommended that one of those bids be considered non-responsive, if everybody's familiar with that. We are looking at then the recommendation to move forward with FNBC with the best bid of those then that remained. Questions about that recommendation?
Well, I do, but
I was looking at you.
in fairness, does any other trustee want to go first? So this is probably more for Director Turi. What I was originally trying to understand is what does our overall financial picture look like? I think this is a really good analysis because it shows kind of the impact of the different options, and the status quo option at 2.95 adds $162,000 onto the cost of these vehicles. But what I didn't understand, which was what was really driving all of the initial work, is how this works with our general fund and our special reserve fund as well too, because both of those look like have significant budgeted surpluses, and I didn't understand why we wouldn't want to utilize that as opposed to just adding on more debt. The second part of the question was really, we do this in the CAFR, which is showing, our overall debt and also what our future liability is going to be. And I think we all have a concern about how much debt we've been adding on to the village over the years. And also knowing that we have this $5 million coming down the pipe with the IEPA loan and additional road construction debt as well. So I don't really see that in here. I don't know if that was talked about at the committee, but those were kind of the other parts of the original ask that we talked about.
Right, right. And I will turn it over to Director Turi, but we did discuss putting together a comprehensive analysis of the overall debt plan, and also looking ahead at the various projects that we know are coming, and looking overall at a 3 to 5 year plan, so we can understand where all of that fits and where the funding and which funds are being used, so we can have a better understanding of the whole picture. So yes, in putting that together, no, not part of our material in the packet tonight. So we definitely want to take another look at what you have raised. But then getting back to the specifics, I will turn it over to Director Turi.
In terms of the capital, using the surplus, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
In terms of the surplus that's in the general fund to be used for capital purchases, it has been the policy, the corporate policy, to maintain 30% on reserve at all times for emergency purposes, and to make sure the general fund has available funding for essential services. So we never keep more than 30% inside the general fund surplus. That's about 30% of operations, and that number gets adjusted every year.
So I guess I'm confused on that, because it's 30% of the general fund expenditures?
Operating expenditures at that time.
So it looks like the proposed budget we had 11.2 million, and 30% of that was 3.38, but the projected fund balance was 3.8. So is that a $500,000 over?
And that after the audit is complete, we'll look at the balances, and anything that's above and beyond that will be moved into the surplus fund.
Okay, and so then within the special purpose fund?
And then in the special purpose fund, which has been historically used for capital projects of infrastructure nature, we are reserving those dollars we have 3 big projects that are coming up that have to be funded, which need the 20% availability on hand before we can commit to those projects. So we've kept those dollars segregated and not used for rolling stock, which we use other mechanism, which is the promissory note, to purchase those.
So, but we're transferring, the budget called for transferring $400,000 to the BNSF fund.
And then there's also, it's going to be more than $400,000. There's also the Central Avenue project, and then we still have to figure out how we're going to fit the west underpass into the special purpose fund. So all those numbers have to be supported by the special purpose fund, which is why we want to have the flexibility and not draw down $1 million from that fund, which it takes a long time to accumulate those funds to get back to the level where we can support those other projects.
Well, thank you. I mean, I apologize if this is difficult, but I guess I'm still not understanding why we want to add to the cost of these vehicles that extra $160,000. I guess I feel like we're not getting a full picture as to exactly what our financial condition is and where it's going to be in the next 3 to 5 years. And you know, we see the memos about the police pension fund and trying to kind of maintain our rates and our costs, and it's just not, I just don't understand it.
Well, in order for us to purchase these essential vehicles, we would have to remove from our reserves $1 million, which I think at this point would be significant, would remove the flexibility of doing any other projects. And in order to do the other projects, we have to have cash on hand. So we wanted to make sure we had available all these other dollars to make sure these projects go forward. We still have to finish the underpass, I'm sorry, the platforms this year, and we don't really know, we don't have a final number on those dollars as well. And we still have to finish the E911 conversion to LTAC. So all those dollars have to be taken out of the special purpose fund.
Well, no, well, I get that, but I guess where I'm going is, do you have some concerns about our ability to fund these other additional projects if we can't even keep up with normal vehicle purchases, that we have to go to debt to do it?
Historically, this is how we funded all our rolling stock over the last 25, 30 years. So the mechanism in place has always been to roll over the debt to purchase these vehicles. So we don't have an internal service fund that's been accumulating funds for rolling stock. So we're on this revolving debt service.
No further questions.
Anyone else? Okay. The second item in your packet was for two budget amendments for purposes of salary for two position changes, and I will let Director describe those very briefly to us. Thank you.
So the budget amendment before you is to fund two different positions. One is a slight increase, a total of $4,750 that's being requested in the part-time salaries account. That would be to fund a slight increase in the hourly rate of the communications manager position. That position has not been filled since last August, except with our former intern, and so now we are seeking to fill it permanently with someone whose qualifications warranted the additional amount. The second piece of the amendment is to fund a full-time position. It is a merger of an existing position in the police department, a part-time position that handles accreditation, as well as a new focus for a management analyst position, which we think is needed in light of the many projects that are coming ahead of us following the strategic planning session and some of the other work that's upcoming in the community. We think that all of the departments would benefit from having a management analyst who is able to work on a variety of projects throughout the organization, assisting really all of the directors as we go forward. So this would be a merger of the part-time position in police as well as these additional analyst duties, and it would be one full-time position that we would be adding.
Thank you very much.
So that would go on the omnibus, the budget amendment. But the promissory note, is something that goes on the omnibus?
It could.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's up to the board.
Yeah. We can decide at that time. We can put it on the omnibus and bring it off if you want, or if you recommend that you want it off separately, then.
Okay. All right. So what are you doing right now? I'm making a motion to put those both on the omnibus?
Yes. Okay. So I'll make a motion to have both the promissory note acceptance of the bid as well as the budget amendments go on the omnibus at the April 23rd meeting.
I'll second.
All right. And then we'll put those on the omnibus. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes my report.
So I had a question, Ellen, on the position. Is there, on the second part of it, I think I get the first part, but on the second part, is there an existing FTE that's going to be retained by the village, or does that person go away? And that's what I wasn't clear on.
The person who held the part-time position in police is actually retiring. And then the new position is actually it's
a brand new body.
A brand new body. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Ruda.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Next, Trustee Sifferman, Public Health and Safety.
Madam President, colleagues, there are three matters that were advanced for presentation at tonight's meeting that emanate from the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting on April 4th. The first item is the Western Springs Police Department 2017 Annual Report prepared and submitted by Chief Buds. I have a high gloss copy here. I'm told that electronic versions are available through the village websites. But this 43-page report provides a most comprehensive picture of the staff membership, organizational structure, service components, crime prevention, and emergency management initiatives, as well as both crime statistics and trends. Chief Budd's opening letter calls attention to an increase of nearly 2% in service calls over the 2016 figure, with a sobering 184% increase in thefts, 32 incidents in 2016, jumping to 88 incidents in 2017. 150% increase in vehicle thefts, 2 to 5, and aggravated assault batteries jumping from 0 in 2016 to 3 in in 2017. The 2017 report reflects every component of the department's public safety commitment to the residents of Western Springs that are articulated in the mission and vision statements included in this report. The department's efforts and achievements in law enforcement, crime prevention, professional development, training, community engagement, and the development of community partnerships are well documented in this report. Not only do I find the 2017 annual report to be an excellent document in and of itself, I find it to be a true reflection of the department's DNA under Chief Budd's clear vision and innovative leadership. Chief, do you have anything you would like to add?
Certainly, I'll keep it short. You did a very fine job in summarizing everything we do here. And I'm glad you mentioned the mission and vision statements of our department. The statistics in 2017, I wasn't pleased with them at all, nor anybody in this room should not be pleased with the uptick in those crimes. But as I reported in the committee meeting, we're not alone in this increase in crime. Our neighbors, the general Chicago region, have all been victimized by this increased property level in crime. We see it every day. And again, as my cover memo noted, that you can be confident that your police department and me as in charge of the police department are utilizing every resource possible in our task forces and everything we can, partnering with our residents and notifications, public notifications, you name it, we're going to do it, and we're going to continue to do it to combat this increase in crime. And with all that being said, I still want to assure that everybody at home that this is still a very safe place, and I will do everything in my power to keep it that way. And finally, I want to just mention my exceptional staff. None of this that you see in the report is possible without the fine men and women of my department, without the support of this board and our various commissions and the public. And I'm very proud of my staff for stepping up their game. And in my 22 years in law enforcement, 2017 has been the most challenging year that I've been a part of. There's change every day in our line of work, and I simply have to tip my cap to my staff. What we ask our officers to do day in and day out and make these critical decisions and keep up with the training, it's exceptional, it's incredible, and I'm very proud of them. And Trustee Sifferman, you asked me at the committee meeting to kind of summarize, my plan, my strategies as the chief, and really there's 4 things that are noted in the report that are a part of our everyday mission here in the police department. I like to kind of call it my 4 corners of my framework. And essentially they are technology and social media, community policing and crime reduction, training and education for my officers, and officer safety and wellness. Those are my 4 primary tenets. I don't take them lightly, and I think if we can continue to work on those as a community, we're gonna be ahead of the game here, and we're gonna be able to deal with anything that comes before us. So again, thank you all for supporting us as the police department. We're very proud to serve.
Thank you, Chief. Those are very, very sound pillars for your administration. The second item in my report is a notice of the swearing-in ceremony for new police officers Joseph Hass and Taylor Fick, scheduled for our April 23rd meeting. The third item relates to the memorandum contained in your packet that was submitted to the Public Health and Safety Committee by Deputy Chief Albrecht, calling our attention to Distracted Driving Awareness Week, a statewide awareness campaign designed to bring better and greater attention to the dangers and consequences associated with driving while distracted. The National Highway Traffic and Safety Association reported 3,477 deaths and 391,000 injured motor vehicle crashes in 2015 due to distracted driving. Drivers aged 16 to 24 observed driving while distracted at an alarming rate. The Western Springs Police Department total electronic communication device citations issued in 2017 was 354, with the majority of those as warnings to the drivers. The department will be increasing its public education and enforcement efforts during the week of April 24th through the 28th. And a lot of that will be focused on at the high school by the officer assigned to the high school. And that would be during that week as well. Colleagues, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Sifferman. And thank you, Chief Buzz, for the annual report. It's very well written, but especially thank you for your leadership. I know we're not the only suburb that has experienced a large uptick in crimes against mostly property, crimes of opportunity, and I appreciate your efforts and those of your force to keep those crimes at a minimum. So thank you very much.
Thank you, President Gallagher.
Moving on to Planning and Zoning, Trustee Terrell.
Thank you. I get the, should be the easy topics after the well, the finances. I get the hot dogs and tropical snow. I have 3 temporary use permits. There are some civilians here. I don't know if they wanted to address the board or whether I just go into it or not. But
they're welcome to address.
You're welcome to it. But the first one we have is Tropical Snow. That's the shaved ice business that's located at Hillgrove and Woodland. The owner would like outdoor lighting, that's festive ornamental lights that are held up by temporary posts put in planters. They're 8 feet. If we could look right across the street, we see it at Devontae and Hillgrove. Creates a festive atmosphere. The owner applied for the temporary use permit last year, which was granted, but he didn't install the lights last year. Your board packet more than indicates the regulations that he'll be subject to. Hours of operation, can't have these lights on all night long. Duration of usage, although it's granted for the year, I think realistically it's maybe we're talking about October would be as late as it would go. We have no objection, felt that temporary use permit should be granted. I don't, did anybody have anything to say from? Okay. The second item for your consideration was a temporary use permit for the Field Park 5K. That's planned for September 15th at 4:30 in the afternoon. It's a race it's a small race. There's only 300 people. It's kept within the boundaries of Johnson, 39th, Harvey, and 43rd Street. It's fully insured. They supply their own course marshals. I don't know if we had needed police out there. We had no objection to it. It was temporary use permit was granted for last year. We have no objection for it being this year. The final temporary use permit is for Mr. D's. Is it Mr. or Mrs.? Okay. The owner proposes a vendor card selling hot dogs, starting this spring and moving into the summer. The vendor carts are temporary use that must be approved by the board. The hot dog carts are self-contained. They have their own water system. The hot dogs they're steamed, and you'll have chips and water and Coke or pop as well. They're going to be using, is it high school kids and college kids, but they have to be over 18? Okay, so hopefully seniors in high school and college kids, they'll pay them is it $10 an hour? I don't know, whatever it was in the packets. They're fully insured. They're going to be limited geographically as to where they can go. When you're at the Tower Green, you're subject to health inspections by our people. We have no objection that should go forward. Did you two have anything else you wanted to say about that? Or you don't have to, but.
No, it's just we chose a more fitting name, Old Town Red Hot. Actually, if you could use the mic. Sure. Sorry.
Oh, you're changing the name on it?
If you would identify yourself.
Hi, I'm
please.
Anthony DeMauro. Yeah, we just changed the name to Old Town Red Hots. Just thought it'd be a little more fitting. That's all.
You're going to be staying, it's around the Tower Green?
Yeah, just throughout the village, the central business district there, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No intentions to compete with the Park District and their concessions, so.
I think it's a good look too. There's a lot of people get off that train, they'll grab a quick hot dog or you know, kids in the summer going around the, you know, as I expressed, I wanted a little more to be done at the Tower Green. I don't think we utilize it enough.
Yeah.
And you may be adding something
Yeah,
that would be.
and we fully intend to keep the space and respect the neighborhood and the town as we found it that morning, for sure.
So
Thank you.
we have no objection to that moving forward at all.
Okay. I have to say, my husband's very happy to hear that you're coming.
Hopefully they're good.
Yeah. Thank you.
These go on omnibus in 2
Yes,
weeks?
if that's your, yeah.
Do I need a motion to put those on, or they just go on
Oh, well,
Just recommendation it would be on? Okay.
Okay.
I'll second your recommendation.
Thank you,
You're hungry
Trustee
too?
Zimmerman.
My life is devoted to hot dogs.
9 o'clock at night.
That's it, you don't have any samples, do you? Get a little late up here.
Heard out in the backyard? That's all I would have.
Okay, thank you,
President
Trustee Terrell.
Gallagher.
Thank you. Any other business tonight? I think we covered it all. So, moving on to the reports. My report, just want to remind our residents that NEAT Cleanup is April 14th. This is an effort that's run completely by volunteers. So I want to thank the volunteers who give up their Saturdays and come out with their rakes to clean up the neighborhoods. It's much appreciated. Also, on March 28th, Village Manager Velkme and I attended an Active Threat Rapid Deployment Rescue Task Force tactical training hosted by our police department in conjunction with the Cook County Department of Homeland Security. The training took place at Lyons Township South and included simulated high-threat incidents, and we were lucky enough to see the police. It was a regional effort, and not only our police, but many other members from surrounding communities there and in action. It was reassuring, and in this day and age, it's necessary to prepare for what you hope never happens. So thank you, Chief, for spearheading that and making it happen. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Just that we had over 40, the 1 week period, we had 165 participants that went through this training, which is very impressive. Primarily, especially at the first day of the training, for the first time ever with this particular group and with us, that we included dispatchers and 911 operators to be a part of the training. They're the first ones taking these calls when the unfortunate call comes in. So they were able to actually have some practicals and some lecture, and we never did that before. So we were excited to have them included for that first day. And then, of course, we had sworn officers, civilian staff, and as you said, President Gallagher, we had the Attorney General's office was represented, even the Coast Guard, Geneva Police Department. We had a wide, Orland Park Fire Protection District was there. We had a wide range of participants, so we're very pleased how that worked out. And I just want to make a point to thank Detective Terry Madler, who is also our SWAT officer, for really spearheading this on behalf of the department and working with Cook County Department of Homeland Security. It wasn't possible without his hard work, so I just want to thank him as well. And thank you.
Thank you. And finally, I just have a brief update on the planned expansion of 294. Tollway representatives have now met with all of our resident groups that will be most impacted by the expansion. Regional meetings hosted by the Tollway will be held shortly, and we'll keep our residents informed on those meetings by posting meeting dates and times on our website and sending out notifications to our email subscribers when we have that information. Most immediate for our village will be the expansion of the BNSF Railroad Bridge, and that work is tentatively scheduled to begin fall of 2019. And that's my report. Village Manager Velkme?
No report tonight.
Thank you. Yes?
Were one of you going to talk about the City Council Mayor's Transportation Committee that was in our packet? The 2-page letter from September?
That is with regard to the underpass, and we're not prepared to talk about that.
No, it was the potential bike path. It's highlighted in yellow.
Oh, the Flag Creek bike path?
No,
Yeah.
I pulled that from the fire.
Oh, you pulled that out?
was pulled.
We're
Sorry.
waiting for more information from the
information.
tollways. So.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. We're on to...
No further report.
In that case, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ladies and gentlemen, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
That's all right. No, yeah, we took 2 items out.